Welcome back. Today we're going to be working with division of fractions again, but today we're going to be looking at using the standard algorithm for solving those problems and looking at fractions within word problems. To begin with, we're going to review a little bit about what we did yesterday with drawing our fractions to find our answers. So we started with whole numbers divided by fractions. Remember that that first number is how much you have to divide up. So we always draw that first number that we have. And then we're going to divide it into groups of 1/8. So we want to know how many 1/8 are in 7. So I'm going to divide each of my wholes into 8 pieces. So I'm going to do 4 this way and then divide it in half that way so that I don't have to do quite so many lines all the way across. So each of those pieces now represents 1/8 of the whole. And I just need to count up how many of them there are. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in each of these holes. So there's 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56. So there are 56 1/8 in 7. So my correct answer would be 56. 7 divided by 1/8 is 56. Okay, next we did a fraction divided by a whole number. So this time we have 2/3 to start with. So we still draw our whole and we're going to divide it up into thirds, and then we're going to shade in the 2/3 that we have to start with because we don't have the whole thing. We only have those 2/3 right there. And then we're going to divide that 2/3 up into 6 equal pieces. So I'm going to go the opposite direction and divide it into 6 groups. And I am looking at how much I have in each group. So I have 2 pieces, but each of those pieces now is 1/18. I now have 18 pieces, and each of those pieces is 1/18. So that group has 2/18 in it. 2/18 of the whole is in each of my 6 groups. You could simplify that to be 1/9, but my answer would be right there. Okay, the next thing we did was a fraction divided by a fraction. So we start out the same. We need to draw our 3/4. So I'm going to divide my whole into fourths, and then I'm going to shade my 3/4 because that's what I have. And then I want to know how many fifths are in that. Well, it's really hard to count out in groups of, or how many 4/5 are in it. It's really hard to count out in groups of 4/5 when I don't have fifths. So I'm going to divide it into fifths going the other direction so that I actually have 20ths. Okay, so now I have 20ths here, and 4/5 is actually 16 20ths. So I'm actually going to count out in groups of 16 20ths. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 16 20ths right there. I don't have all 16 of those 20ths because I don't have this piece right here. I have 15 out of the 16 that I need. So my answer is going to be, well, I have 15 out of the 16 that I need, or I have 15 16ths. So my correct answer, 3/4 divided by 4/5, is 15 16ths. All right, you can watch this video about how to divide whole numbers and fractions using the standard algorithm, but we are going to practice using some story problems. So you have 1/2 of a pizza and you want to share it equally between 2 people. How much of the pizza does each person get? What's really tricky with story problems is that you have to know how much you have to start with. That should always be the first number that you list. And that's not always the first number that's written in the story problem. So you have to read it very carefully and think about, well, how much do I have to start with? What am I actually dividing up before you write your problem? So I have half of a pizza. So I am going to take 1/2 and I'm dividing that among 2 people. So I have 1/2 divided by 2 people. Now, the standard algorithm that we learned from just watching that video, it's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. One thing that's kind of tricky that kids want to do sometimes is they want to flip this first fraction right here. We can never, never, never change what we start with. We only have half of a pizza. We can't flip it and say that we have 2 pizzas. So that first number is never, ever going to change. It always needs to stay the same. Then we're going to switch this to multiplication. And we can't just, dividing by 2 is not the same as timesing by 2. So now we're going to flip that second fraction. So we freeze, change, and flip. The second one, whoops, it should be 1/2, not 1/4. Now I can multiply fractions straight across. So 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 4. So how much of a pizza does each person get? Each person gets 1/4 of the pizza. Let's try another one. Sean divided 1/3 of a gallon of ketchup equally into 2 smaller bottles to put on the tables in his hamburger restaurant. How much ketchup did he put in each bottle? So I asked myself, how much ketchup did he start with? It says he divided up 1/3 of a gallon. So he started with 1/3 of a gallon and he divided that up equally among the 2 bottles. So if I'm going to use the standard algorithm, I'm going to change this to multiplication, but I can't change my 1/3 of a gallon that I start with. So I freeze that first fraction, change it to multiplication, and flip the second one. And then I multiply straight across. So I get 1/6. How much ketchup did he put in each bottle? He put 1/6 of a gallon of ketchup in each bottle. Okay, pause the video and try this one on your own and then play it to check back how you did. So a baker is making cakes for a big party. She uses 1/4 cup of oil for each cake. How many cakes can she make if she has a bottle of oil that has 6 cups in it? So how much total oil does she have? She has 6 cups of oil, and she wants to divide that into groups of 1/4 because each cake uses 1/4. So my answer is 6 cups of oil divided into groups of 1/4. So when I rewrite that as multiplication, I freeze that 6 cups of oil because that's how much I have, change it to multiplication, and flip that second fraction. And then I can divide or multiply straight across. So 6 times 4 is 24, and 1 times 1 is 1. So I can just leave that one off. So how many cakes can she make? She could make 24 cakes with her 6 cups of oil. Okay, pause the video and try the next one on your own. And here we go. The serving size for the granola that Ted likes to eat for breakfast is 3/4 of a cup. How many servings are there in a box that holds 13 cups? So I asked myself, how much total granola do we have? And that is 13 cups. I'm going to divide that equally into groups of 3/4. So when I rewrite that, I freeze that first number. I have 13 cups of granola and I can't change that. Change to multiplication and use the reciprocal. Flip that second one. And then I can go ahead and multiply straight across. So 13 times 4 is 52. 1 times 3 is 3. So I have 52 thirds, which I would want to put in simplest form. So that just means 52 divided by 3. So that means that I have 17 full servings, and then I have half of another serving. I don't have half of a cup left over. I have half of a 3/4 cup serving left over. Okay, how many half cup servings are in a package of cheese that contains 5 1/4 cups all together? So I have 5 1/4 cups. My first step here is going to be to change this to a fraction because it's a lot easier to deal with when I don't have a mixed number. So 5 1/4 is 21/4, and I'm going to divide that into half cup servings. So I'm going to rewrite that as a multiplication problem where I freeze that first number because I can't change it, and then I flip the second one. Okay, and then I can go ahead and simplify first. When we multiply, that makes us have to deal with a little bit smaller numbers. And so I have 21 times 1, which is 21, and 2 times 1 is 2. And if I put that in simplest form, I have 10 and a half. So there are 10 full servings and half of another serving in my package. All right, of the songs in Brianna's music library, 1/2 are rock songs. Of the rock songs, 4/5 feature a guitar solo. What fraction of the songs in Brianna's rock music library feature a guitar solo? Now, this is a really tricky one because I'm not sure this is a division problem. We're wanting to know, she has half of her songs are rock, and of those, 4/5 are guitar. So I'm not dividing anything up, I'm actually just multiplying here and finding out what is 4/5 of 1/2. So if I multiply straight across, actually I'm going to simplify first by dividing by a factor of 2. 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 5 is 5. So 2/5 of her music library features a guitar solo. Lucy's bird feeder holds 3/5 of a cup of bird seed. Lucy is filling the bird feeder with a scoop that holds 1/10 of a cup. How many scoops of bird seed will Lucy put into the feeder? So we know the total amount that it can hold is 3/5 of a cup, and we're going to divide that into groups of 1/10 because she's scooping out 1/10 at a time. So when we rewrite that, we freeze that first one. She has 3/5, that's or only holds 3/5 of a cup. Switch it to multiplication and flip that second one, use the reciprocal. I'm going to simplify first by dividing by a factor of 5 because it makes my numbers way smaller and way easier in the end. And then I have 3 times 2 is 6, and 1 times 1 is 1. So how many scoops of birdseed will Lucy put into the feeder? 6. She will put in 6 scoops of birdseed. Okay, I would like you to try this problem on your own, so pause the video and give it a shot and then come and check it. Okay, let's see how many statues Diana can paint. She has 7/8 of a liter of paint. That's all she has, so that's how much she has to start with. Each statue requires 1/16. So I'm going to divide it into groups of 1/16 to see how many statues she can paint. So I'm going to use the standard algorithm by rewriting that as a multiplication problem. I freeze that first number. She only has 7/8 liters of paint, and I can't change that. Change that to a multiplication problem, and we flip that fraction. I'm going to simplify first by dividing by a factor of 8 so that my numbers are smaller. And then I get 7 times 2 equals 14, and 1 times 1 is 1. So she could paint 14 statues with her 7/8 liters of paint. A stretch of highway that is 12 1/4 kilometers long has a speed limit sign every 7/8 of a kilometer. How many speed limit signs are there? So we're going to take that whole length of highway, which is 12 1/4, but I'm going to change that into a fraction. So that would be 49/4 would be the freeway, and I'm going to divide that up into stretches of 7/8 of a kilometer. Now I'm going to rewrite that as a multiplication problem. I'm going to freeze that first number because I can't change how much highway I have. I'm going to use the opposite operation, and then I'm going to flip that second number, and I am going to simplify first because those are big numbers which will make it hard to simplify in the end. So I'm going to divide 49 and 7 by a factor of 7, and I'm going to divide 4 and 8 by a factor of 4. And that makes my number so much smaller and so much easier to multiply. 7 times 2 is 14. 1 times 1 is 1. So there would be 14 speed limit signs on that stretch of the highway. Okay, pause the video, try this problem on your own, and then come and see how you did. So Amira has 3/4 of a bag of cat food and her cat eats 3/8 of a bag per week. How many weeks will it last? So she only has 3/4 of a bag. So that's the number that I start with, is how much she has to start with. And we're dividing that up into groups of 3/8. So when I rewrite that, I freeze that 3/4 of a bag because I can't change it. And then I change to multiplication and I use the reciprocal. I flip that second fraction. I'm going to simplify first because it will make my life much easier in the end. I'm going to divide 3 and 3 by a factor of 3, and I'm going to divide 4 and 8 by a factor of 4. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 1 is 1. It will take, her cat food will last for 2 weeks. All right, last problem. Give it a try on your own and then come check it. So what quantity of salt would you need to make half a recipe? So the amount of salt I need for the full recipe is 3/8 of a teaspoon, but I'm going to divide it in half. So when I rewrite that, I can't change how much salt I need, change to multiplication, and use the reciprocal. It doesn't look like I can simplify first, so I'm just going to go ahead and multiply, and I get 3/16. I would need 3/16 teaspoons of salt. Good luck.